Stop buying every watch you fancy when you have the money.
Hi everyone, so welcome back to My Watches podcast, and today's on the Watches and People episode 10. We have Thor, as you can see. I hope I'm pointing at the right direction.
You're pointing at the right place.
Yeah, Instagram and everything will be, Instagram handle and everything will be listed as usual at the bottom. And I think it's customary. First things first, we do a really quick wristwatch check, then over to Thor for a quick introduction, right? Why don't you go first, Thor?
Me? Yeah, I'm wearing a watch that I unboxed yesterday.
Oh wow!
Which is the the latest Furlan Mari, Nero Sabia, which is the one with the black gilt dial with the gold print.
Mm-hmm.
As with any watch they make, the quality is mind-blowing for the price.
This is the one that is automatic, right? Not the Mecha Quartz one, is it?
No, this is actually the Mecha Quartz. I've actually got the automatic with the La Joux-Perret movement, but this one, I was completely skeptical to Mecha Quartz when I bought one of these on the first campaign they did, and I got it, and the execution of the case, the finishing, the details, the sizing, it just makes you forget that it's got the Mecha Quartz inside. It's dangerous, but it's true. Yeah.
All right. Over to you, Han.
Yeah. I'm rocking something that I got on the last day of 2022, which is the Omiwatari, the SBGY007. More on that on other episodes, but yeah. Moving on.
Really nice, very nice. All right, so I have the Kurono Grand Hagane with me. Yep. I haven't worn this piece for quite some time and just got it here for Singapore. Absolutely love it. All right.
Yeah, I've actually got both a similar. I've got the right before Christmas. I got the Grand Seiko SPG W283, which is the 37 millimeter glittery blue dial.
Yeah.
And I also before Christmas in December got my first Kurono, the calendar green one.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I saw the 283 on your profile the other day. Really nice icy blue dial.
Yeah.
All right. So why not a quick introduction from you, Thor, to tell the audience who are you, what do you do?
Basically, I have a day job in Norway, which is I am an agent for 4 Italian designer brands in furniture in the Nordic region, which is very, very busy. At the same time, I write about watches. I'm an editor at Fratello Watches. And I also write for British GQ, where I also had my first, it's online, but I actually had my first print story there in a supplement before Christmas, which was amazing. That was like a goal this year. So I keep very, very, very busy and probably do about 2 or 3 articles a week on watches. Wow. And I've been doing that for the last 2 years.
Yeah. I would just immediately assume that your day job was the writing part and furniture design was probably the side job.
No, I have a very patient wife and 2 very patient children.
All right. So you mentioned you only started watch journalism 2 years ago, am I right? Is it or?
Well, it's about 3 years ago. I started on Instagram. I've always been interested in the watches. I started on Instagram, and then all of a sudden my stories on Instagram were being more detailed and were turning into little films. And then I started a YouTube channel, which was called Wristwatchism, which was like a horrible name, but all the good names were gone. I managed to get it up to about 1,000 subscribers, but all the work with the filming, the camera work, and the editing, creatively it was amazing, but it took so much time. And then by accident, I was asked to write a story for a Scandinavian blog. I did that, but then I found out that my English writing in English was actually easier for me than in Scandinavian, Norwegian for some weird reason. Because I lived for about 6 years in the UK, so I just felt that is basically it has the dangerous combination of being my creative outlet and also like feeding my watch addiction, which is a more dangerous aspect of it.
Oh, okay. So at this point, in terms of your watch journalism career, is that more of a passion side of it, or that also generates part of your, a decent amount of your income?
It does generate a decent part of my income as a side gig. It didn't start out that way. The YouTube thing was a pure passion project. I loved it. I loved doing the filming, the editing, but then I had a very busy day job too, working for a big German kitchen appliance company. But then when the pandemic started in 2020, I got an article accepted at Time Tide, the Australian blog. And then for about a year, I was stuck at home with the pandemic, getting increasingly fed up of my tasks. And within that year, 2020, I probably wrote about 200 articles on watches.
Wow.
For Time Tide. And I was the independence editor. But that just got it to the point where there was like articles, doing voiceovers for YouTube and stuff and videos. That was amazing, but and it just like got me deeper into the thing. But then I needed to cut back a bit, and then even being somewhere closer to home, because obviously editorial meetings was like 5 o'clock in the morning my time, because it was in Australia.
Yeah,
like every Monday, as you can imagine. We were all in different time zones, like every bloody time of the day, and it was driving me completely mental. But it was a great start, and then I got into Fratello. I've been an editor there for a bit more than a year, and I'm loving it. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. So has it come to you at a point that you have considered turning this into your main gig instead of a side gig?
About a year and a half ago, it was definitely on the cards. But obviously, being in Norway, the cost of living here is very, very high. And that would mean writing every day of the week. And the thing is, when you do that, it ends up being turned from passion just to being a job.
A chore.
Yeah,
and it just becomes a normal job, and that's dangerous, because I've got friends who've been very interested in cars, and they've started working with cars, and then all of a sudden the interest goes away because it just becomes your job. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's a good thing to have your passion, keeping it a bit distant, because all of a sudden watches become just your job. It's like being interested in music and being a music journalist. All of a sudden, you're not listening to music anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, pardon my ignorant or naivety, but I mean, from an outside perspective, it would seem like a dream, isn't it? Because for someone that loves watches, there's only to live and breathe watches daily and get paid for it. But yeah, I mean, that's probably just a naivety of my end. Yeah.
No, it's true, but it is very, very enjoyable, and it's a bottomless rabbit hole with watches, and I find myself still being very enthusiastic about a lot of watches, because there's I don't know, it keeps going around in waves, and obviously frustrating being here in Norway, which is such a tech forward country. If you're in the food hall and you see 7 men and 2 women, and there'll be like one of them wearing a normal mechanical watch, and half of the rest will be wearing an Apple Watch or a Garmin, and the rest will be wearing nothing. So I see it as a sort of calling to like try to convert them back to proper watches again. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So maybe tell us a little bit on how and when did you start your watch collecting journey?
I don't know. I was probably probably when I was in my 20s. I got by chance I bought a vintage Longines, and obviously I still remember the first watch I got when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So I think the watch interest, and from when I was little, looking into the windows of watchmakers, the watch interest has been there constantly, but obviously it goes in waves. But it's always been there, and the fascination with the mechanics of the watches, the micro mechanics inside, obviously.
Okay. And at that, I mean, was it just your own interest that how you got into it, or was there like your influence from your parents or grandparents and so on?
I think there was I obviously I have one special watch that I inherited from my granddad, which was a nice Tissot Sea Star. I have a gold Omega that I got from my dad. So obviously it has run in the family, but it was just I don't know. It's always been there for the last probably 30 years, my watch interest. Yeah.
I see. All right. So throughout your 30 years of watch collecting, has that, in terms of your change and taste, evolved since from like where you started off with and right now?
Yeah, especially after you
That
started writing about watches.
Well, that's very dangerous, because all of a sudden I saw myself going from between 5 and 10 watches to having 25, and then everything from a 120-year-old Zenith pocket watch to a Casio F91 in orange, and everything in between. So now I'm actually at a stage where I'm trying very, very hard to consolidate the collection and actually focus on what I like, instead of jumping onto every impulse after writing an article about that. Oh, that is actually a really nice watch. I might have to need one myself. That's really dangerous.
So you're in like triple digits number of watches right now, or?
No. Now I've managed to get it down from about 25 to less than 20 now.
Okay.
I sold 2, mainly because I've gotten away from big watches, because obviously they are really cool and you get that vibe of the big diver's watch and stuff, but after a while you realize that the comfort of a smaller watch is just something completely different.
Yeah.
And you don't need to have that big show off thing, and the annoying fact that you can't get it under your shirt or under your jumper. So basically 2 watches I've sold the last 2 weeks, both have been like more than 42 millimeters, and I'm just like very happy about it.
Totally agree. I think most Asians have small wrists as well, so I can represent them to say like, yeah, totally agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
So what? Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, obviously I've always had a big love for Seiko, and at the certain point I had about 8 different Seikos, and like everything from the Shogun to the Samurai to the Sumo and all. And then I realized that they are actually quite big. I managed to like boil it down to now having one vintage Creedor in 38 millimeters. I have a Grand Seiko of 37 millimeters, and I have one watch which I think will be my last big watch that I'm keeping, and that is the blue SLA 023 Marine Master 300. Because it's a huge, enormous watch one. At 44 millimeters. But the way, obviously, the Seiko ergonomics is fantastic. So it's still soft, it sits on your wrist, and it's like I don't know, it's just like, obviously, it's the classic cliche of actually making you believe that you can go diving 300 meters and go exploring up a mountain, which I'm not going to do, but you get that feeling. And it's just such an amazing watch. I put it in there and it's like, it's too big for me. And I put it on, and then after 15 minutes, it's like, well, this is still amazing. And the finish is amazing. And then after 4 hours, I have to take it off because it's too big and heavy. But I'll still keep it there, and I'll still, that probably, otherwise, I'm like, 38 millimeters, perfect. 44 is just silly, but that one's going to stay.
Fair enough. I was just about to ask, does watches have any sentimental values to you? I mean, do you associate them with milestones and stuff like that?
Yeah, massively. I mean, obviously, quite a few of the watches are like, watches that I've got when I've had like milestones. I had a watch I got for a round birthday, which was a bespoke 38 millimeter watch from the Dutch small manufacturer Holtinich, which actually that small brand ethos and the fact that you can have a dialogue with the maker of the watch is so invaluable, and it's so brilliant. The fact that you can send a message to the maker and actually get an answer back, and it's like, look, I want that case, but I want that dial from the different case. Can you put that one, and that is special, and that's more special to me than the big brand grails of Rolex and Vacheron. It's just that personal aspect.
So would you say that is what, in terms of what you're leading towards now, in terms of your coming up pieces as well, that you're looking to support in terms of independence that would give you that special experience that you mentioned?
It's a mix, but I keep finding myself coming back to the independence and the fact that the Corono Calendrier that I got, and the fact that they are quite difficult to get, and you have to get lucky and get on the tiers and get it. But it's like being part of a family, and it's like having that. It's a completely different feeling having that watch, and then seeing Hajime Asaoka doing the photo shoot himself for the watch on his desk, instead of knowing how many watches Rolex produce each week, and seeing the small video from the production of Tudor, where you see them stamping out the snowflake hands like ta-ta-ta-ta-tan. It's just so different. That small batch thing just makes everything more special.
Right. So I got a question on that. While we're on this topic of micro brands or / independence, there are a lot of, in a way, flack that they receive, especially let's take Chrono, for example. There's a lot of people that disagree in terms of their price point, because it's the end of the day, it's just a watch with a Miyota movement and so on. And they don't factor in that design or artistic element that involves in terms of creating that design, that whole process, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, that to me, that's an easy parallel to draw, because I work with very expensive designer furniture, and I understand the fact that you can buy a chair at IKEA that costs €200 or $200, and a similar sized chair by an Italian designer can cost 10 times as much. It can cost $2,000. It can cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, but it's because of the thought process behind it. It's the materiality, it's the quality, and people get way too hung up on movements. And I've found that it was a big leap for me when I managed to get past the focus on ETA movements and in-house, and actually seeing Corono and seeing especially the small Japanese brands, Corono, like Minaze, like Kikuchi Nakagawa, seeing them for what they are, and realizing the dial on the Corono with the Urushi lacquer, and knowing the process and the time that lies behind that, and the fact that if it didn't have a Miyota movement, it would cost $10,000, not $1,500. Which to me makes the movement, it's a good solid movement without saying workhorse that you see in all the watch articles, and I try not to write. To me, it's a solid movement, and the casing and the thought process behind it just makes it so special, despite of the movement. And to me, I've gone past it. And I appreciate the Japanese craftsmanship and the fact that they make them in such small numbers, and the thought process and design behind it, and the fact that it's so freaking perfect in terms of size, finishing. I mean, the Corono which is my first Corona, just putting it on, it was like at home on the wrist after 4 minutes.
But to me, I'm a big Corona fan as well. I'm part of the Corona contributors, so I totally relate to you. And especially, it's quite difficult to explain it to people as well. I think it's something that you got to experience it. I mean, if it's for you, it's for you. If it's not, then but there's different preference, right? But one thing I always try to tell people is that when you buy a Corona, that entire unboxing experience, it's just a different level, right? The thought process they put into it, every single watch has a backstory to it and why it's there, and the box relates to it as well. The color, the packaging, all follows in terms of that entire team, which you don't see that often.
I guess it's more like I guess it's more of like buying a piece of art as well, right? I mean, the movement does its job. Gets you like point A, point B, I guess, good enough. But I guess the rest of it, like what you spoke about, the craftsmanship, that's almost like basically appreciating art, which obviously everyone has different tastes, and not everyone appreciates it.
It's like actually I can draw a quick parallel too, because that, like the 38mm Corona, I had a Black Bay 58 for 10 months with a fantastic in-house movement. I never fell in love with it. I kept putting it on, putting it back, putting it on. And one of the reasons was obviously because it is a brilliant watch, but it was so hyped up that I didn't want to wear it. Like, because of the fact that, you show up at a get together, or you go on the internet, you go on the Instagram, which has changed the whole watch family. You see, you saw 2/3 of the shots of the Black Bay 58, and it's so amazing. And the fact that it had a fantastic movement, but the case finishing was good, but small details, like the undersides of the lugs being incredibly sharp, and the Corona, which costs like, a third, or half, and you go, and the details are so well thought out that it completely overrules the fact that it's got the Miyota movement inside.
Well, say, don't put it any better. So, all right. So perhaps let's move on to the next questions. Perhaps I see that you have a lot of like Japanese pieces, right? You mentioned Creedor, Grand Seiko, Kurono, and so on. And you mentioned about other independent Japanese watchmaking as well. Where does your love of Japanese watchmaking come from? How do you get into this particular world?
That's a good question. I mean, I appreciate the Japanese culture per se. I mean, my favorite, to be honest, my favorite writer is Haruki Murakami. So I don't know. It's just the Japanese mindset, and the fact that they seem to have perfectionism in their genes.
Yeah,
and it's the fact
for better or for worse sometimes.
It's about making the best product you can, and the price is completely secondary. Just a small, I don't know. I think it started coming with the appreciation of Seiko, which had everything in-house and still managed to make a watch that cost $500, which is still mind-blowing, no matter where it comes from. And the ergonomics of a cheap Seiko diver being better than a $5,000 Swiss diver. Just those small things, and the fact that they put so much emphasis on the details, and there's always a proper thought process behind it, and even if Seiko probably has a design committee, they still have this sort of ethos on the thread, and you can, I don't know.
Okay,
it's just
sorry, go ahead. Sorry about it.
No, I think I lost it.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. So, while we're on the topic about Grand Seiko or Seiko in general, I'm not sure, but I think we have previously talked about this as well, Han, at the red. With Grand Seiko and Seiko now slowly and gradually increasing in price, I think they're trying to probably keep up with in terms of other Swiss manufacturers. Do you think eventually they would, in a way, lose their touch, and instead of being a very much of a value proposition for the consumer, and eventually it will become something like a Swiss manufacturer?
Yeah, that's the challenge. That's the big challenge for Grand Seiko. I mean, we see now in the States where they now have Grand Seiko US as a separate company, and they've actually both there and also in Australia, they've actually moved up. So they're actually now, instead of being the niche brand that you got when your cousin went to Japan, they are now up there being considered together with the other luxury brands. And I mean, I'm, seeing them, even the market here in Scandinavia, which is so tiny, you're still seeing Grand Seiko moving up. I mean, it is disappointing seeing the prices move up how the way they do, and the fact that they're now 2 or 3 times what they were 10 years ago. But you only have to touch a Grand Seiko and look at it and compare it to the Swiss luxury, which costs twice as much, and the quality is just simply astounding.
Fair enough. If someone were to, in a way, get into watches right now, what would you recommend for them to look at as a very start?
I mean, the default answer is always Seiko when you start. But the thing now is that they still have a predilection for larger watches. And obviously, even if the Japanese wrists are narrow, they're now making watches of 40, 41 millimeters, but still, you'll still get a big Seiko diver, which, yes, will be very comfortable because of the ergonomics, but it'll still have a rubber strap, which is like a meter long, even for my wrist, which is not that thin. But Seiko is great. And then it's the micro brands, which are like completely, they have changed the way we look at watches, and you get big value as long as you research what you buy properly. I mean, we've gone past the trends of we've gone past the Kickstarter thing.
Yeah.
And now micro brands are transcending into becoming proper small brands with pre-ordering and even stock of their watches, and it's a great way to start. If you want to start with like between $200 and $600, you get a lot for your money, and that's a great stepping stone to something else.
Okay. Is there any, I would say, not too popular or up and coming micro brand that you can recommend for us? If there like something that you noticed from your watch journalism?
Good question. I mean, obviously, I have a love for the Mari brand, but that's obviously some people view that as quite a very popular micro brand.
Yeah.
Obviously, they won the GPHD last year and stuff, but it's just small brands like American brands like Laurier, which do amazing watches. Monta is like moving up to becoming a small brand, but they do fantastic quality. They do some of the best bracelets you can get. Small Canadian brand called York and Front, which makes some amazing 38 millimeter field watches that cost about $300, which are, in value terms, it's right up there and very good in terms of ergonomics and comfort. And obviously that's the funny thing, because you find there is a bit hit and miss when it comes to the micro brands, because you might find something that looks amazing, and you see, even if it's a size that fits you, you might find it being with very long lugs or very short, or it's a bit odd, but sometimes they just hit it, and maybe it's because they have better control over what they create themselves, instead of having a big committee, like design committee, like they do in the and some of them post their designs on micro brand Facebook groups and actually take feedback back from the buyers and actually implement it into what they make. And obviously well-known micro brands like Singapore, like Zelos with the El Shantang and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of good values out there.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So what is your, in a way, the next in your radar, right, in terms of the list of watches you're going to get, and why?
Even with my love of small brands, independent brands, I do have a sneaky thought that I need something nice and rectangular in my collection, because that's something I am missing. So I last year I was going to buy a Reverso, the Tribute, I actually had an order in, but they changed it because of they changed it to boutique model. So my order got cancelled. I got too pissed off. But the Reverso is one, and then or maybe a Cartier, because I am being colored by the massive wave of popularity Cartier is having at the moment. The quality is amazing. I actually tried on a Cartier and a Reverso like 4 days ago, and that is definitely something I would think about when I'm consolidating my collection, because I'm going in a dressier direction. I mean, even if I'm wearing casual clothes, having a 38 millimeter watch, a 36 millimeter watch is just so comfortable. And then now you get smaller watches which are as tough as a 42, 44 millimeter watch used to be 10 years ago.
Well, fun fact, both Han and I here have, or Han used to have a blue Reverso Tribute, right? I got it first, and I think 2 days later, Han got his due to missing mine. It's a great watch, by the way. If you're looking for something that is very much a more versatile, that can probably be blend in between formal and casual, I think Reverso is probably the one that you want to go for. Yeah.
Although no, I must say the tribute wore a little bit big for me, and that's also because there's no more options of sizes, right? Obviously, when they moved to the tribute, it's only one size to keep it universal. And I put it on. I think I wore it for about a year, but didn't wear it all that much because it's kind of dressy, and that led me to pretty much decide to sell that, which actually funded this one. So yeah, so that happened.
Well, that is dangerous, because I'm being lured by that deep blue dial. But I did last week try on a Reverso medium size with a normal guilloche dial, but still with the Fagiano strap. And that strap just completely transforms the Reverso. Instead of being an old man's watch with the crocodile strap, once you get that thick leather strap on, it's just a completely different watch.
So that's the one that I'm going to be looking for next.
Yeah, that small medium size, that was pretty much perfect. Yeah,
agree.
Perfect.
Yeah.
By the way, the medium is discontinued, by the way. So if you do see it in stock and you want it, now's the time to get it. Otherwise, they don't reproduce it anymore, at least for now. Yeah.
But I'm to be honest, I'm quite big on, when it comes to big budget watches, I do get a lot of them pre-owned. And obviously it's things like Chrono 24 and stuff, but I do get a lot of watches there, and especially from Japan, because of the whole Japanese mindset. It does drip down onto the pre-owned market, and the pre-owned watches I've had from Japan, the standard of the watches and the details are completely different from something that comes from Europe, because they take so much care.
Yep, definitely.
So that's like, but obviously, even after so many years, I still make mistakes. So just actually the Grand Seiko SBG W283 37 millimeter manual wind, amazing watch. If I put it on, I do not want to take it off again, because it sits so well on my wrist. I had the SBGH 279, the one with the brushed granite dial, and the 44GS case. It was amazing, and it was so sharp, and it was 40 millimeters, and I thought it would fit like a dream, and it was so big.
Yeah.
And the lugs were so long, with the first link of the bracelet sticking out.
Yeah.
And the fact that sometimes even Grand Seiko does miss, because obviously, the case back was so fat that the watch was like floating on top of the wrist. And that feeling is not good. I kept trying it and putting it back, and trying it, putting it back. And at the end of the day, I actually swapped it for the SBG W283, which was nearly new, which was a lot small. And that was just putting that on the first time blew me away with the comfort.
Yeah. Nice. Glad it all worked out in the end for you. Yeah.
Right.
I have a question about ever since you started journalism, obviously that increased your exposure a lot, and increased your enjoyment a lot of watches, right? But on the flip side, was there any I don't know, uncomfortable truths that you've uncovered through started writing about watches, or some things that start to irk you, you know?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, obviously, I'm sitting in a glass house here, because obviously there aren't many very critical articles about watches, you know. But for me, it's basically, I do pick a lot of what I write about, and I pick what I like and what I love. But you do find out things like, you know, the Bermuda Triangle, that is the in-house movements. You know, what is an in-house movement? What does it, you know, what does it entail? Is it just changing the rotor and adding a finish onto a balance bridge? Doesn't freaking make it in-house, does it? So there's little things like that you like realize, but at the same time, it just makes you, I don't know, appreciate more of the complete picture of a watch design. Like going back to the Corona, the fact that, you know, what's behind it, and, you know, when a watch is a lot more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's the main thing I've taken away from it. And the fact that I'm, you know, you do find yourself moving up in the price range from starting out with $400-500, and all of a sudden, you know, you just enjoy watches that cost $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000. And but I still find myself enjoying the small micro brands. And, you know, you can actually write about and enjoy a Greubel 4C that costs $300,000 without having to think about the fact, you know, whether you afford it or not. You know, you go to a gallery, you go to the Louvre in Paris and have a look at the Mona Lisa. Doesn't mean you can afford it, but you still enjoy it. So that, I think that's really important to think about. And a Grail watch can be a symbol more than a watch that you actually will be able to afford one day. That's immaterial. You can still desire it, and it can be something you long for, even if, you know, I'm not going to sell the house to buy a Global 4C.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's an interesting take.
Yeah. Right. So what do you think about in terms of the current watch scene right now? I mean, like, with watches being extremely hyped in the past 2 to 3 years, and everybody who was previously not into watches are into watches now. You have the Omega Moons watch, where people who are non-watch enthusiasts are starting to recognize in terms of all these watch brands and stuff. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, and where is it leading us to in the future?
I think the Moonswatch was a fantastic concept. I mean, obviously, it went the wrong way to start with, because of the fact that now it's so easy to sell things online. So 70% of the watches were bought by scalpers and resold. And, you know, I have a Bamford, George Bamford G-Shock that I got online, and when that was launched, it had like an episode where there were like gangs pushing into the G-Shock shop, buying them and then selling them on eBay, you know, 2 hours later for triple the price. That makes things difficult, but I think that was something that'll pass. But I am actually enjoying the fact that Rolex pre-owned prices are now dropping, because I think that whole hype train really needs to slow down really badly, and get back to, you know, the fact that, you know, you might still not be able to buy a Submariner at a retailer, and you might still have to buy one for like 60% more pre-owned. But then that doesn't really, I'm a bit of a contrarian. So even if I might really enjoy a Submariner, I don't really want one, because I don't know, I just don't want that image. It's like the easy choice if you have the money. And I'm enjoying the fact that, you know, someone at the Oscars can be wearing a vintage Cartier instead of the, you know, classic sub.
Fair enough.
But I'm also think it's a very, very positive thing that we're seeing big values now at the auctions for independent brands like FP Journe and the quirkier vintage Cartiers, things like that. And I think it's brilliant. I think that's a good way to go. And then, that just means that there are a lot of choices. When you have a lot of money, there are a lot more choices than Patek and Rolex.
Yeah.
Nicely played. Perhaps one last question to wrap this up for this podcast. What would be one advice would you give to your own past selves, right? Since you have 30 years of experience, would you change how you approach your watch collecting journey?
That would be stop buying every watch you fancy when you have the money, because all of a sudden you're left with that. And do not buy many watches at the same time, even if you have the money. All of a sudden you've backed a Kickstarter campaign, you've done a pre-order, and you bought a new watch, and then you have a period of 2 weeks where you have 3 new watches arriving at the same time, and you don't appreciate them. It's like having one watch, and then it's also, looking deep into your collection and what made you start, and then focusing on what you love instead of ending up buying 30% of the watches you buy you be selling again because you worked out that they didn't fit, and you really knew that to start with, because I know that I can't wear a 45 millimeter watch with a 50 millimeter lug width, no matter how cool it looks.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's a great advice. I think that's a great advice to everyone as well that's listening too. So if you want to take it. All right. So I think that very much wraps up our podcast. Anything that you want to add in, Thor, or you want to shout out or anything?
Yeah, I remember you mentioned one of your questions will be like that, when we're talking about Grail watches. That is a difficult one, but I am a independent brands and all that. I am a bit of a contrarian, so I would, if I would pick a Grail watch at this point, I think it would be a Kikuchi Nakagawa with the amazing black polished case. Obviously $18,000 is expensive. I had a very scary moment that I was actually thinking about selling like 6 of my watches and paying like a 50% deposit on one and then waiting 3 years. But that would be something I would consider at a certain point as a Grail watch. Obviously the other Grail watches like the $200,000-$300,000 Vacherons or whatever, they're more like I don't know. They're Grail watches, but on a different plane, like Grail watches that you can never afford, but you can still admire them for what they are.
Those are watches that you keep it aside until you win the lottery, right? So just on the back of your head. Right. I mean, if you do get the Kikuchi watch, that would essentially expedite your consolidation exponentially. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah,
exactly. No, I mean, and then but just obviously let me know if you want me to come on again. Next week is LVMH week, so you have all the news from Tag Heuer, Zenith, etc., and Hublot. I'm working on 2 stories next week for the LVMH. And I got some secret images, but I can't share them.
Okay. Well, we're more than happy to have you here if you are available. So yeah. So I mean, for those who are watching, if you do want Thor back in, just feel free to drop a comment and just say we want you back, Thor. Right. So. All right. So I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast for today. And very big thank you for Thor for coming on today. It's been a marvelous episode. We hope to have you back very soon. And I think for the rest, stay tuned for the next one. Right. See you guys.
Thank you very much. I'll see you. I'm off to shovel some snow. I'll see you. Bye.
Bye.